Praise the Lord, everyone. Let's go ahead and read Genesis chapter 6, 1 to 11. And the title is Giants Were Born to Women. And it came to pass when men began to multiply, pardon me, on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men that they were fair, and they took them wives of all which they chose. And the Lord said, My spirit shall not always strive with man, for that he also is flesh. Yet his days shall be 120 years. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them. The same became mighty men, which were of old, men of renown. And God saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And it repented the Lord that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him in his heart. And the Lord said, I will destroy man whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast, and the creeping thing, and the fowls of the air, for it repenteth me that I have made them. But Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. These are the generations of Noah. Noah was a just man and perfect in his generations. And Noah walked with God. And Noah begat 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. The earth also was corrupt before God, and the earth was filled with violence. Again, reading verse number 1, it says, And it came to pass when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them. Here it refers to the fact that sons and daughters were born. Amen. Because the men obviously would have been sons. The daughters were, we go the other way, women. Amen. So men and daughters, but actually we can say boys and girls were born to the people that were on the earth. Amen. So there were a growing number of men, but also there were a growing number of women also. In any case, the verse speaks of men and daughters, which should be thought of as both male and female being multiplied. Yet the reason I suppose that the word daughters was used because of the relationship that they were going to have, which Genesis 6 mentions a little later on. Yet the word multiply was the idea of God in the beginning. God wanted the people to have children. He wanted them to multiply, be fruitful, and multiply. Those were his words. So humanity would have babies born to them, and more. That was the will of God. However, when this idea sprung up among the fallen angels, having illicit relationships, unholy marriages, however you want to call it, with the daughters of men, then that idea of multiplying was not the will of God. And so the fallen angels had come into this life as human beings, and they were willing to come into this life as human beings, one could say, because they wanted to destroy mankind, and they wanted to corrupt the seed so that there would be no Messiah, and that also they could have their own seed, because as fallen angels, they were not able to multiply. And so um, they became human beings. They went out of the state that they were in and went into a different state, a state of being a human being rather than a fallen angel. And so that multiplication with the fallen angels who were made human beings and daughters of women, daughters of men, were not what God intended, and not intended to humanity to multiply in that way. And so God did not intend humanity to be mixed with fallen angels, as Enoch had also mentioned about it. That's in the book of Enoch, by the way. The question could be very simply, how is it possible that these fallen angels, and how is it possible that they could have some type of seed or semen to deliver unto the daughters of men? Well, we'll take a look at it a little bit. These daughters that were born unto men were in fact human beings. They were normal, as any other human being would be. They're daughters of men. They're human beings. There is no mention, of course, of any disabled people at that time, for it only mentions those that had come upon the earth as sons and daughters. And so here it says in verse number 2, and this is where the thing starts, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men that they were fair, and they took them wives of all which they chose. They took. They took. There's a good point there. What does seem to be evident in this verse is the difference between the wording. First, they are noted as sons of God, and the other portion is the daughters of men. So there's a distinction there. Thus, you have one originating from God and the other originating from men. Daughters of men, that is, they originate from they're products of human beings. The sons of God, on the other hand, were the ones created in the beginning, the angels. They originated from God. Since the daughters are originated from men, that means they are human beings, but the sons of God are not until they decide to change, but then their seed is still different. So that is not the idea presented that the sons of God are those who call upon God, and the daughters do not call upon God. We can say that both were not calling upon God. Even the daughters were not calling upon God because they were falling into these relationships that were not of God. And the sons of God were obviously not calling upon God, because in the end we have violence explodes and evil spreads. Where does it spread from? I think the context of the scripture is pointing to this scripture where these um, unholy marriages are taking place, and that brought the violence and the wickedness on the earth. That's in the context. Amen. So, um, the contrary is the ones who are originating from God are different. Amen. They are different for the only ones that originate from God, that is, that were created as human beings, were Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve were the ones created by God, so therefore they were, we could say, sons of God, like a son. They were created, the original creation of God. Therefore, the sons of God here are not human beings because they're not Adam and Eve. Amen. And the sons of God don't come upon the earth until New Testament. That is, as human beings, we are the sons of God because we are born again. But this talks about their original birth, not birth, actually. It's creation. So I think this is pointing to a creation rather than a birth. We in the church are born again. We are born of water and the Spirit. We have that spiritual birth, and so we're called sons of God because God did it himself. So God did this miraculous creation to make the sons of God, yes, but it's not by birth. These are by creation. Amen. Hallelujah. Praise the Lord. So the sons of God there are not really human beings, but they transform themselves to becoming like a human being. They are originally created beings of God, from God. And in view of Adam and Eve, God was the one who brought them together in marriage. It was like God brought them together. And the only ones that he himself had brought together in marriage were Adam and Eve, like that. However, here there is a different concept. The concept of the fact that the sons of God are looking towards the daughter of man and seeing, of course, they're fair, they're good looking, and they're desiring to have a relationship with them, to marry them. So the concept of people who are of God, that is, created beings of God, having a relationship with those that are not the original creation of God, the daughters of men, um, that's different. But the concept of people who are, okay, so let's look at it this way. The concept of people who are of God and those who are not of God having a marriage obviously was common in the Old Testament. And it's even common maybe today. Not should be common, but it probably was. In the Old Testament and the New Testament, surely even in the church age. But the results of those unions are not giants, physically speaking. They're not giants. These giants are actually giants that are physically very tall. And the word giant is there, not quote unquote human being. Hallelujah. So they're giants. Different word. Amen. So we can say that the result of one who is of God and one who's not of God, they're going to be human beings. But these came out as giants. And it doesn't happen that way today. Didn't happen back then between people that were of God and people who were not of God. We even have a story of a prophet who married somebody who wasn't of God. No giant came out of that relationship. It's not what happens. It's not natural. Something is different in these uh, marriages, and it comes out. The result are giants. So there's something different here. Amen. What is presented in this text is the fact that the result of those unions of the sons of God and daughters of men are giants. Therefore, it follows that the daughters of men are human, but the sons of God are not human. For how could they, in their union, produce giants? Not giants in the fact that they are just humans, but they are called giants because they are not just human. It's like part, or, you know. They have humanity, yes, but they also have what the enemy was trying to copy before it actually happened, a type of quote unquote divinity. However, they are not divine, for they will die. Only God and the angels that have been, the God who is immortal, and the angels who have been faithful to God, they are immortal as well. And it seems that the giants did die. Therefore, it doesn't seem, they did die. That's a fact. Therefore, they were not immortals, but they were mortal, and not angels from heaven or their seed, for in this context a great deal of violence erupts after their births, after the births of children, after their births, yeah. Therefore, the only other option is that these giants are the seed of the fallen ones, that is, the fallen angels, as the book of Enoch mentions. Yet it was Jesus Christ who said the following in Matthew 22:30. For in the resurrection They neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are as the angels of God in heaven. As the angels of God in heaven. Different types of angels here. Of course, the angels of God are not given in marriage among themselves. They don't have the relationships. And even amongst mankind, for they are the ones who are in heaven, they're faithful to God, were not corrupting themselves with mankind. However, the fallen angels, they're different, for they were not in heaven, and so as to say, attending to God, but they instead have their home in hell. And it can be stated that they decided amongst themselves to become human beings and to get married to whichever woman they wanted to and take them. Not really by choice, I would think. They chose, but the daughters of men probably didn't choose. In the state in which they were as fallen angels, they could not marry, so they had to change their state. I suppose that they had that power and decision to do so and had come into the state of a human being. However, in doing so, they could not, as is presumed, return to their former state once they changed. Amen. Hallelujah. Thus they changed to the from the former thus they changed from the former state of not being in this world as fallen angels to human beings that could be seen, mingle, and fellowship with others and have that kind of marriage. They decided to take the women of their choice as their mates to have children by them. Of course, as fallen angels, in that state, they could not have any children at all. As for those that did come into the state of a human being, it could be surmised that they thought that that was one of their privileges to have children, to have progeny, to have descendants that would, quote unquote, look like them in the human state, but also those who would be born, and here we see an image, would follow their wicked acts. That is why Genesis 6 speaks a lot about violence and wickedness, that the earth had become corrupt. So many were their wicked acts. So Genesis 6 speaks of a lot of violence, and no doubt there was much wickedness in the earth, for all had corrupted themselves, it says. That corruption, it can be stated, was not only a corruption of behavior, but it was also a corruption of the seed. The seed that had been corrupted because it was not just the seed of a human being, but it was the semen of a fallen angel becoming a human being. There's no doubt that fallen angels have some power. It seems that the power that they had was in being able to make themselves change states from a fallen angel without being seen by mortal man to a human being with other human beings, being able to see that visible form. People could see that visible form, insomuch that they were able to choose among themselves, choose among the women to have wives and live like a human being. It is similar to that which God would become in future, a human being. However, God himself will always be God. He'll never be changed. He'll always be the same yesterday, today, and forever. But when he decided to become a human being, he would also have that role, but maintain the role as God, which the fallen angels could not do. In verse number 3 it says, "And the Lord said, My spirit shall not always strive with man, for that he also is flesh. Yet his days shall be 120 years." Here is the verse that points to the fact that God's spirit had been striving with man about this corruption. There's something about the previous verse that points to the fact that God's spirit was striving with man over not performing such marriages. However, it seemed that mankind was not listening to the call of God. More and more of mankind began creeping into corruption. Thus here God makes a judgment call, which means that the verse states that God had decided in regard to mankind as a whole, but human beings, not fallen angels becoming man. He would deal with them later. The judgment was for mankind to live much shorter lives due to the fact that they as a whole were not heeding God's calling. Verse number 4 says, There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them, the same became mighty men, which were of old, men of renown. So when it talks about there were giants in the earth in those days, that's the days before the flood, and also after that, that is after the flood too. There were some giants, not because they were able to go through the flood and boom, boom, there they are. Still, no. The ones who were before the flood died. Then they did the same kind of thing after the flood, however, not over all the earth, whereas the first part was trying to corrupt all of mankind. The second part, after the flood, was concentrated basically on the area of Israel in that aspect. Here is what happened to those unlawful and corrupt unions that God's Spirit was essentially striving with mankind not to engage in as a whole. The union of the sons of God, that is, fallen angels, becoming human beings with daughters of men, those whom God had striven with but was unsuccessful in persuading the women not to take those men due to the fact that they were not human beings, or they were not to have those kind of illicit relations. And I'm sure that Enoch, during his time, he preached, must have warned people, women, daughters of men, the men, man, humanity, about these relationships. The fallen angels made human were creatures that came into this life, but they were not born. They were not born into this life. They didn't have fathers and mothers as any normal being would have. Therefore, if any of the women who had asked them about their fathers and mothers, they would not be able to direct them to anybody on earth that was their father or their mother. Further, according to what Enoch had written about these, they were teaching the women about sorcery. Therefore, one can say that at that point they were fathers of sorcery. They were the ones teaching about sorcery, and that is communication with the other, we can say, demonic spirits or other fallen angels that were not made human beings, so that they could also, in that way, keep the ideas of wickedness continuing on in their minds and in their acts to further corrupt themselves. In addition, the result of the seed of the sons of God with daughters of men were giants. They had become mighty men. The reason is clear, because they were here indicated as giants. Thus they were formidable in that they could kill, destroy, steal, whatever they wanted, for they would get their way. They were extremely strong. Thus they had become renowned because of their strength in subduing others to, possibly even killing, those who would not conform to their will. It does say that the result of these marriages were sons born, because it mentioned they bare children to them, the same became mighty men, which were of old, men of renown. Now, in this context, it sounds like that there were no women that were giants. It was just the men were giants. However, in Old English, when it says men, could be both men and women. Hallelujah. I've heard that they were just the men that were there. Hallelujah. It does not mention specifically that these were women. It does say that they were men and they were mighty. But again, looking at the Old English, it could be men or women. Yet in other versions, usually it takes the word and mentions, you know, the plural, kind of like children. I've found one version that did say that. The others kind of like the same men. So if it was the fact that they were only able to produce men, then there is another kind of um, moment of a sign that of who these were. Amen. So Genesis 5 dictates, though, the men or the sons and daughters were born in Genesis 5. Sons and daughters. So it specifies sons and daughters. But here, in this passage of these unholy marriages, it only mentions that there were um, men that came out of these relationships, unholy marriages, and not women. So it may be true, no doubt, that it's talking about the fact that they had boys who grew into mighty men and not women. And it says, verse 5, And God saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination and the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. God further investigated the actions and thoughts of mankind as they were being taught by these formidable beings, and the giants, showing others their wickedness, like being a model for others to follow their wicked deeds. Of course, the Bible does not go into any details at that point to describe their wicked deeds in order to give mankind any ideas either to continue their evil deeds. Though their wickedness, that is, their actions, were getting extremely evil on the earth, and their thoughts too had become very wicked like it. And the book of Enoch mentions some of the evil acts that they had committed, and they are extremely wicked. It was not only the fallen angels turned men that had such great evil thoughts, but they transferred their thoughts and ideas for others to emulate. Further, the giants would also do those things that were utterly insane. And one might add that the giants were no doubt the first insane beings that walked the planet, for they had some crazy ideas that would make any normal person go crazy. Verse number 6, And it repented the Lord that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him at his heart. So here it gets to such an extreme, and it presents the idea of these unholy marriages, and this is where it ends up. The fact that the Lord is now grieved at what's happening on the earth, because he had warned them with his spirit, and they didn't listen. And then here it says, now he's kind of like, he's like, I've got to do something about it. I'm going to bring my judgment upon this earth. That's what he was saying at the time. So the fact that the women had united themselves with those fallen angels turned men not listening to the Spirit's leading and in not doing so, and having giants that were evil and wicked in their practices, did grieve the Lord. The decision that God makes here is for the purpose of cleansing the earth of such corrupted seed. These were not ordinary decisions of people, but their lifestyles had turned from evil to extremely wicked, which meant that everything which the Spirit of God had tried to do to persuade mankind was not working except through Noah. Thus, the end of the road for those people that had been brought up and lived, God had to deal with the entire world's population except for one family. And only one family, that is Noah and his children and their wives. In fact, that family was going to receive instructions for their salvation, and only they themselves would be saved. The instructions from God had to be followed to the T. In other words, they could not have any help from anyone else telling them what needed to be done. Instead, it needed to be directly from the Lord to them. Otherwise, they would not be saved. The instructions that are from the Lord needed to be heeded in order to be saved. Many people will say unto the Lord in that day, that is the day of judgment, the reason why they will say, Lord, Lord, have we not done this and that and the other? Because they did not follow the instructions of the Lord given to the people on the day of Pentecost to be saved, they were saying those words. Thus, God's instructions that Noah had received needed to be followed exactly as those were the plans of salvation for him and his family and the other animals. Verse number 7, it says, And the Lord said, I will destroy man whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast and the creeping thing, and the fowls of the air, for it repenteth me that I have made them. These were the plans that the Lord had for the entire earth. The plans that the Lord had for the entire earth, and the plans for the earth, the plans that the Lord has for the entire earth in the future are written in Revelation. Those plans also have been drawn up and shared by the Lord for the church, the bride of Christ, to know about. Thus, it behooves us always to be prepared for the events as they unfold. As for Noah, just like today, he had a route of escape, a plan mapped out for him by the Lord in order to escape such judgment. The church has the plans that God has for the end too. Noah had to enter into the ark once it was completed, and all the animals that were brought to the ark were going into the ark too. Once they were in the ark, then God shut the door. They were all in, were safe, as God had instructed them to be. The safest place to be is in the will of God. Outside of the will of God is the plan of the world or the enemy. For the church to heed the will of God is the best and the safest act. Anything outside of that is actually unsafe, it's dangerous. Even though the world may think, believe, and even announce that it's not safe to be inside the ark, it is actually the safest place to be. Everyone else could have said that to Noah it was safer to be outside of the ark, but Noah had the instructions from the throne of God. Therefore, he was going inside the ark, and he was not going to waste time outside of the ark once he was ready. And God shut the door anyway, so he couldn't get out. It's necessary to get into the will of God for our lives. Why did God kill all of the animals too that were outside of the ark? It could have been due to the wickedness on the earth at the time that the sins of the fallen angels made men were using such for their purposes too. And as well, the giants, and the book of Enoch does mention such things that had transpired. In verse number 8, it says, But Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. Now, here is the good news. The fact that Noah was a blessed man, the blessings that he had before the flood, in the sense of material blessings, may have been just kind of like all in vain, except for that which he put into the ark and made the ark. And so, that which he had taken with him onto the ark was probably minimal in comparison what he had to have taken into the ark, such as loads of food. Yet it can be stated with certainty that the book of Enoch was also with him, no doubt. Verse number 9. These are the generations of Noah. Noah was a just man and perfect in his generations, and Noah walked with God. Just like Enoch walked with God, Noah also did too. So here it mentions that the generations that Noah had lived through, he was just and perfect in them. The giants and those fallen angels made men might have had long lives in those days, but one does not have any written reference to their timeline of how long they must have lived. However, it can be assured that since that they did not have quote-unquote women giants, then it follows that they could not remain per se like that as a seed on the earth, but God had his way of getting rid of all of them at once through the flood. And except for then they did the same thing after the flood, so there were different sets of giants. Yet the only one and his family that would be able to make it through that flood was the one that was the perfect and the just in his generations, Noah and his family, his sons and their wives. Verse 10 says, And Noah begat 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. The earth also was corrupt before God. Verse number 11, and the earth was filled with violence. So we have corruption and violence on the earth before the flood. But of course, then after the flood, we started the same kind of thing. Noah had all his children before the flood, and they presumably were triplets. Noah, even after the flood, did not have any more children born to him. The 3 sons did have sons and daughters after the flood, but Noah did not. The earth was corrupt before God, and the earth was filled with violence before the flood. The violence was, one might say, everywhere, and people were suffering because of it, and it was something that God had to judge and take care of. May God bless you today in the name of Jesus.